looking at how the first church was, and then applying that to us as a church and asking the question, what could we be like based on that? What should we be like based on that? And the First Baptist Kindergarten Ministry that's been going on, Kathy, you're going to have to help me. How many years? I mean, we're in the decades, so I have lost track of how many years. I mean, are we close to 60 years on this thing, Ginger, Kathy? I'm getting nods on that. 55 or 65? 55? Okay. So we've been going on for half a century, and part of the reason that it's promoted that ministry and why we continue to do that is because of a core belief, a belief that the first Christians had. And so we are proud that we are continuing that belief, and here's the belief. We believe faith is intensely and deeply personal, and it's supposed to be. It's about a love relationship with God, but it is never, ever meant to be private. Personal, yes, but never private. It is supposed to be opened up and available and extended and invited for everyone, and that's part of the reason, maybe the main reason, we have something called First Baptist Kindergarten, so kids and families who may not go to church anywhere else, maybe they do, maybe they don't, but if they don't, by golly, they are going to hear the gospel and get his love from the faculty, from the volunteers, from the administration, from the teachers, from everyone involved with that. So that's why we do that. And that's what we're looking at today as we hit Acts 17. I want to look at, I'm just so eager to share this with you. It's so interesting to me. I hope I'll do a good job at conveying the neatness of what's happening in Acts 17. Paul shares the gospel and takes it to different people at different places, and we've been joining him on that journey. And I love to see how he engages the culture around him. No matter where he's at or who he's with, he doesn't have this speech that he has packaged, and he just steps into a new town and a new place and just shares the same speech. As you've been with us for any length of time, I hope you've noticed he doesn't do that because the gospel is so big and so flexible, it doesn't need a package to enter in. It can go in anywhere. So I want to share with you and show you how he does that in Acts chapter 17. So look with me, starting in verse 16. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue with both Jews and God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace, day by day with those who happened to be there. He reasoned with them. I'll get to that in a second, but it says he reasoned with them in the synagogue. That makes sense. That's where religious people hang out. But he reasoned with them in the marketplace, day by day. Now, the marketplace for them was the center of everything. It's where you got your news. It's where all the entertainment and art existed. It's where you did your business, and the banks were in the marketplace. It's where you had family reunions. Everything happened right there in the marketplace. The political center, everything. And Athens to Greece was the Hereford of Deaf Smith County. It's where everyone went. It's where they got the papers, the radio station they tuned into. This is where they went to get all of that. And Paul entered into where everybody was. He didn't go to the synagogue and just hoped people would show up there. He actually went into their world. And it said he reasoned with them. And reasoned does not mean debate. So feel free, even in your Bible, maybe you're not great at writing in your Bible, you see maybe that's bad to you, so maybe off to the side on your note page. Write, reasoned does not equal debate. Reasoned equals asking curious questions. Do you know the difference between a curious question or a condemning question? If you've ever had a mother, you know the difference. If you've ever had a mother ask you, who left the food out all night? That's not a curious question. She's really not interested in the answer other than to find out who needs to be dealt with in a more severe fashion, okay? A curious question is when you're genuinely interested in the answer because you believe it's going to give you insight and understanding into how the other person works or how the other group works. So when it says Paul reasoned, that's what he did. He didn't walk in with his assumptions and his prejudice. He went and started looking around and asking people questions. And here's what was always on his mind. I wonder what drives them. I wonder what makes them tick. I wonder what fuels and filters the decisions that they make day to day. I wonder what makes them feel like really good people, like winners. What is that? I grew up in a small town in Iowa. I have a decent idea of what it's like there. The answers to those questions there. I lived in Dallas, Texas for 4 years. I've lived in Little Rock, Arkansas for 7 years. I've lived in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma for 9.5 or 10 years. And I've lived in Hereford for 2 years. Now, I married a West Texan who grew up here. And we've been married 19 years. But I still come in here very curious as to what makes people tick. And everywhere I've been, that's what I come into the surroundings with in my mind. What are the values of this place? As a Yankee from the north, it would be very simple to conclude, well, Dallas, Little Rock, Oklahoma City, Hereford, they're all in the south. They're pretty much the same. People put extra syllables on words that don't belong. Pie is a 3-syllable word. Apple pie. It's like a song. It's beautiful. In the north, it's not. I have learned from living all the different places, if you order bubbly beverages, it's different based on where you are. And this place is the most confusing there is. I remember when I first moved to Texas and a waitress came and said, "What would you like to drink?" And I said, "A Coke." And she said, "What flavor?" I said, "Cherry. I like cherry. Add cherry to everything. So go ahead, cherry Coke." And then the person next to me ordered a Coke, and she said, "What flavor?" And he said, "Dr. Pepper." And she said, "Okay." And I said, "They make Dr. Pepper flavored Coke? Why don't they just have there can't be a nickel's difference between real Dr. Pepper and Dr. Pepper flavored Coke." And then they began to explain to me, no. That's not how it works here. In Arkansas, they call it soda. In Oklahoma City and where I grew up, they call it pop. You can't just come into a place assuming everyone, it's not just the South. It's different. And that's just one small difference. And so Paul comes in reasoning and asking questions. So, what is it that drives us here in our culture? In West Texas, in Hereford? How many of you, by a show of hands, have grown up here and lived here your whole life? That's about half of you. You can't answer this question because you can't even smell the town at night. You can't. It's just normal to you. When we used to visit here, my wife's sister lives here. When we used to visit here, our kids would just be talking in the car, and halfway between Umbarger and Hereford, all of a sudden the conversation would stop, and they'd go, "Oh, what's that smell?" And we said, what are you supposed to say? It's the smell of money, right? Yeah. Man, if my money smelled like that, my wallet would be in a whole nother room. But anyway, when you're coming in new, you have eyes for things and ears for things, maybe even a curiosity for things that people who've just been in one place their whole life don't have. And it's not their fault. They're blind to it. But let's talk about that for a little bit. I'm going to give you a 19-year married to a West Texan and a 2-year living and breathing and smelling and eating West Texas culture's observation. You can take this for what it's worth. Every people group have problems, they have dreams, they have issues, and the culture around them tries to provide answers and directions for all of that. Now, I believe the gospel has a unique take on all of those, that the gospel can answer and help people's problems better than the culture, can give them better direction for their dreams than anything else. But to get to that, first you got to ask the question, what are the people's values here in Hereford? What are the problems that people face in Hereford? What are their dreams? That's what I came here asking, and I'm still asking, and I'm learning. after living here 2 years, here's my observation. We have some visuals to bring it to life. One, I've learned that manners are always important. Always important. It would be better to lie and have manners doing it than to tell the truth and be blunt. If a waitress comes to your table and asks, how is everything, and the food actually isn't all that good, it would be terrible in this culture to go, really wasn't that good. I don't know who's back there, but they're not doing a very good job right now. Maybe you could tell them and it could get better. Can you imagine if you were with someone at a table who said that? Your skin would crawl. You'd be better just to say, thank you, yes ma'am, well done, and move on. And then when they're gone, then you talk about them behind their back. Or how bad it is then. But you don't do it in front of people because manners really matter. The second one, this one's more serious. This is about, I couldn't think of a better image other than a duck who's got, on the top of the surface, calm, cool, collected, but underneath the water, going crazy. It's just chaos underneath there. And I'm learning, my observation tells me in our culture, look, if someone asks you, are you okay? Is everything okay? You say, fine. Yeah, we're fine. Everything's fine. We're fine. But really underneath, there may be an emotional or even deeper tragedy going on that's causing a lot of problems. But you are not going to show that weakness. You're going to act like everything's together. Another cultural observation I've made has to do with relationships. If you're driving, you better have, there's one hand that's for the wheel and one hand for waving. And it doesn't matter if you know them, and it doesn't matter if they're driving the same car as you, you better wave. And it's an aggressive wave. I've had the one finger wave here. And not the one I want either, but most of the time it's a gentle hand going up. But if you go to the store, if you are hoping to get in and get out, you need to go to a different town. Maybe a different state. Because Walmart here is an excursion. You better pack a lunch, take a bottle of water, because if you meet anybody that knows your name or that you know, you should stop and have a conversation. And if you pass them by and just politely wave, I have learned, that's beyond rude here. That'll get you talked about after you're gone. Because the value is relationships. Stop and talk. Why be in such a hurry? Enjoy that, okay? I'm learning that. Another value here is having a healthy, a big family. When I mean healthy, I mean there's a lot of people in it, and most of them kind of get along. And they like being around you, and you like being around them. But if you have dysfunction in your family, you don't talk about that. Again, it's the duck. Well, fine. We're just not going to bring that up. But having a big family that likes to be around you is a major, major value here. Health, I would say, is not the number one value of a family, but size and admiration is. Having people talk good about your family, I mean, that lifts people's head above their shoulders higher than they can reach. It's a big value here. Another one, Jesus matters in Hereford, Texas. I found that out. He almost matters as much as football or sports or free time. If you want to see a ghost town, visit Main Street on Friday night in the fall. Whether it's a home or away game, it doesn't matter. Brooke has said for years when she grew up in Texas, she believed people, hopefully they have good security systems, and now thankfully we do, because it would be easy for just a couple bandits to enter a West Texas town on Friday night and take everybody's stuff because nobody's there. Sunday morning's a different story. But Jesus does matter. But let's not let Jesus affect how we do our sports and how much time and energy and passion and money we spend on them, and let's not let him touch our hobbies either, and how we spend our free time or who we spend it with or what we're doing in that free time. Like, Jesus is important, at least underneath those things, is what I'm learning. And another value, the last one, is loyalty. Loyalty is huge here to Texas and the United States in that order. To Texas and the United States. It's big. It's really big to love the United States of Texas and the United States of America, the United Counties of Texas. Those are just realities. It's not unique to Hereford, in my opinion. Those exist in many other places I've been, and I'm sure that I haven't been. But do you wonder what makes us tick? Is that what you found? I could be off. If I'm off, or there's things I'm missing that you think are even higher up than that, I would love to learn that. Because I'm coming in new, trying to figure out what it means to live and move in this area, and raise a family in this area, and be effective in ministry in this area. And I wanted to do that. So I'm coming in with a lot of curiosity and a lot of problems because I grew up a Yankee. And I've lived in a lot of other different southern cities that don't operate like this one. So if you have advice to give me, I'm all ears, okay? When Paul showed up to Athens, that's how he came in, with a lot of curiosity. And he says in verse 23, "As I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription to an unknown God. So you are ignorant of the very thing you worship, and this is what I'm going to proclaim to you." So he looked carefully. Again, no prejudice, no assuming, just simple observation. And what he found in Athens is they worship a lot. Worship's really the wrong word. They give their attention to a lot of different things. And we talked briefly about this last week, because in Athens, the gods were just projections of human beings that had a lot more power. But the gods were moody like people are moody. And so you sacrificed to the gods and you prayed to the gods, but you never adored them because they weren't deserving of adoration or worship. You didn't worship the gods, you just did stuff for them, hopefully to make them happy so they wouldn't make life miserable for you. But you never loved them. And he said, I walked around and I found something. You've got an altar that literally says to the unknown God, meaning you know there's something bigger and better out there than all the versions you got, and all the story you got. Your culture of Athens says beauty's important, education's important, victory is important, success is important. And you've got altars built to all that stuff. And you have this other one is to the unknown one, because something deep in your bones says there's something missing. And you know it. And so Paul doesn't come in there trying to convince them of something they don't believe. He says, you already know it. Let me just show you what you already know. And I think when it comes to our community, our town, that's really the best approach with the gospel there is. I don't think our times are a whole lot different than these. And here's how Paul talks to God about them. He said, look, you know there's something bigger. Let me describe him to you. 2 verses I'll share. In verse 24, he says, "The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by human hands." He says, you have an altar to an unknown God. It's actually better addressed to the God. And let me tell you about him. He's big, and he's strong, and he's in charge. Unlike all the other things that you think and value and sacrifice and pray to, and give your daydreams to, and give your energy to. Those things don't feel like they're in charge. Let me tell you about someone who's big enough to be in charge. But he doesn't stop there. In verse 27, he says, God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. Meaning, not only is God big and strong, God is close and tender. And that's something they had never heard before. So he says, you know that. Something in you yearns for that. You can't put your finger on it. Here it is. Here's the God you've been waiting for. It's actually the God over all these other crazy things that you've been elevating above yourself. That's their culture. All right, now let's back up to Hereford, Texas. What about us? I've walked around this town. I've biked around half of it, I feel like. I haven't found an altar anywhere. And certainly not with like the unknown anything. But do we have altars here in Hereford? I think so. I think we have proof that everybody living in this zip code believes there is a God that is strong and a God that is tender, and that God exists. They may not acknowledge him with their life or their activities or their money or their affection or their words, but they know he's there, and here's how I'll explain why I believe that. The altar I see in Hereford, Texas is social justice. And what I mean by that is things like human trafficking. That repels everybody I've talked to in Hereford, Texas. They hate the thought of other human beings taken against their will to places they don't want to go and made to do things they don't want to do. They hate that. Everybody does. Everybody hates the abuse of women. Everybody I've met hates the idea and the reality and the prevalence of child pornography. So here's what that tells me. That tells me if you believe that's bad, whether you live in Hereford or Dallas or Oklahoma City or Little Rock or even Lehigh, Iowa, it doesn't matter where you live, that stuff is bad everywhere. Moral shoulds or moral obligations prove the fact that you believe in human rights and some things should be fought for and defended no matter where you are or live. That proves you already believe in a God, because those things make no sense without God. Biology can explain moral feelings. Everyone in here has moral feelings, and biology can explain why. Because our ancestors proved to us it's a lot easier to survive when you love one another and you can trust one another. But if you have a group that is cruel and betrays one another, that group doesn't survive very well. So biology explains the existence of moral feelings. Biology cannot explain the existence of moral obligations. That should be acted on everywhere at all times. Yet everyone I've talked to in this town, whether they're Baptist, Catholic, atheist, or any other ist or ism, that's what they believe. And they get passionate about it. And there's a reason why they do. Because whether they want to say it or not, it doesn't matter. Just like Paul came in there and, like, I'm not going to convince you God exists. I'm just going to show you already know he does. Everyone I've talked to in this town knows God exists in the form of strength and tenderness because of how hard and how passionate they are about fighting for trafficking, abuse, pornography. They already know it. That's what I believe is a pure example of an altar that Paul talks about in Acts chapter 17. And then in verse 32, here's how I'll end. This is how Paul ends. He brings up the resurrection. When they heard about the resurrection of the dead, some of them sneered, but others said, "We want to hear you again on this subject." At that, Paul left the council. That seems very abrupt. But talking about the resurrection is really the only proof that anyone ever needs. I was a youth pastor for about 10 years, and the youth's favorite question to talk about, like, how do you know God exists? And they usually cross their arms like this. How do you know God exists? Because I don't see any mention of the dinosaurs in Genesis. Tell me about dinosaurs. Well, look, I mean, this is the internet age. If you want, you can find somebody who's written something about how this word in Genesis means dinosaur. Boom, there you have it. Yeah, but is it an earth that's 6,000 years old, or is it an earth that's 15 million years old? Because blah, 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 blah. And so again, and all I've told these kids is, it's just this. The Bible never goes there. You know what the Bible says? The resurrection. Start there. End there. Live there. Did the resurrection happen or not? If it did, you better change your entire life around it. If it didn't, well, what are you wasting your time doing? Bottom line. You can spin all you want about how intelligent design is amongst the cells in the body and also in the stars in the universe. And have fun, have a ball. It just doesn't mean much when it comes to proof. The only proof the Bible ever talks about in terms of the existence of a strong and tender God is the resurrection, all the time. And that everything in the Old Testament was pointing toward it, and everything after it points back to it. It's why Christians get so bonkers around Easter. It's not because we can't think of another holiday to celebrate. It's because everything about us is based on that tomb being empty. Period. And that's it. And so when Paul brings that up, man, they started to get edgy, and some rejected him because it's offensive. It's contrary to the way everyone else thought. Yet, unintimidated, Paul jumped into a culture and started talking about what they already knew based on careful and curious and loving observations. And the reason he did that, the reason he entered their marketplace, is because Jesus entered our marketplace and became curious and lived among us, ate among us, slept among us, suffered among us, and wasn't just rejected, he was tortured and killed. So we've got all the motive, all the examples we need to enter into our culture with curiosity, with love. And to ask, what makes you tick? What makes you feel like a good person? Let me give you an option to consider that I believe somewhere deep inside you already know, that you may be ignoring for one reason or another, that will give you freedom and peace and enthusiasm unlike you've ever experienced in your life. So let's talk about the resurrection.